Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Chloe and my pronouns are she. I am lead researcher and the moderator of today's event. Thank you for sharing the space with us. I am a white queer settler. This ultimately signifies that I benefit from and resources generated and disseminated by First Nations, Métis, and Indigenous persons, Indigenous disabled persons, as well as to separate peoples. I currently reside on the traditional territory of the Andamandaran and Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Black peoples. So the territory of the Algonquin peoples will forever be my home, and where I first learned from indigenous communities. Whenever I take a walk with my dog on country road or spend time with my horses in the fields, I recognize my privilege to witness the beauty that is nature. When I retain knowledge in my own office, I acknowledge the coloniality that prevails in the field of disability studies and sexuality studies, where both my community-based research and doctoral research are located. As a community-based researcher and a doctoral student, I am continuously learning about the intersections that exist between disability and indigeneity, and ultimately how society further marginalizes these intersections. Through my work, I commit myself to unlearn knowledge embedded in colonialism and recognize the systems of oppression that remain at the forefront of education. I strive to improve my own learning of the world that I readily benefit from.
NEADS is a by and for cross-disability, cross-Canada charitable organization. And our pillars are debt reduction, in-class and on-class experience, providing employment. We have events, resources, reports, and financial assistance programs for students with disabilities, We also collaborate to improve opportunities for disabled students and graduates. The VA4A project is a 2-year project with an additional 2-year expansion funded by Employment and Social Development Canada's Support for Student Learning Program. This project aims to empower and support disabled students while navigating post-secondary education. It recognizes the layers of ableism prevailing within these institutions. It provides spaces for discussions and resource sharing. Our programs include webinars, hybrid tour stops, and quarterly reports, and the expansion of financial assistance program, which also funds the Accessibility Resilience Program.
As it was previously mentioned, NEADS aims to empower and support through its programming disabled students as well as disabled graduates seeking employment. Today's guest presentation encapsulates both since it pertains to apprentices and disability. We are joined by Emily Arrow Smith from the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, as well as Jason McBride from the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. NEADS collaborates often with both organizations, and I am thrilled to share this space with Emily and Jason. Thank you.
Okay, hi, my name is Emily Arrowsmith, and I'm from an organization called the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. And I'm just going to see if I can share my screen. Can everybody see that? Okay, great. I'm hoping you can see my presentation. So just a little bit about the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum. The Canadian Apprenticeship Forum is a national nonprofit organization. We've existed for 24 years, and we have a board of directors with 20 board of directors with 4 equity priority seats, which are going to be available in our next election, which is occurring in September. So we are hoping one of those organizations that represents persons with disabilities will get a seat on our board. Our mission is to collectively work with the apprenticeship community to identify best practice solutions and to remove barriers and support apprentice success across Canada. And for those who don't know, apprenticeship is a work-based post-secondary option. Instead of spending your time in a lecture hall, you spend 80% of your time on the job, learning from an employer and a journey person mentor. And then the other 20% of the time is spent at college or a union training center where you're learning with your peers and you're learning theoretical concepts and getting help with your skills development. So that's what apprenticeship is. I'm happy to chat with you today about some of the initiatives that we're trying to undertake to help apprentices who pursue this post-secondary option. In terms of activities at the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, we host 2 conferences. The Supporting Equity in Trades Conference, the next one's going to be in Toronto in May 2025. And we are really hoping that organizations that support persons with disabilities and that apprentices and tradespeople with disabilities can participate at our conference in May. We also have our National Apprenticeship Conference, which brings together employers, unions, educators, the provinces and territories, and equity priority groups to discuss key issues relating to apprenticeship training. We also offer programs for leadership and mentorship for women in the trades. And we also implement a number of different projects, including projects that involve apprentices with disabilities and seek to support apprentices with disabilities. If the person who isn't muted could just mute, the background noise is very distracting. So we do a lot of research at the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum, and we have identified that apprentices with disabilities do experience barriers. About 13% of youth between the ages of 15 and 24 have disabilities. There was 7% of apprentices who reported having a disability in the National Apprenticeship Survey, but that is probably under-reporting from what we know about apprentices, especially with mental health or learning challenges, which is very common for younger people. The percentage is probably a lot higher than that, but that is what the survey found. When we survey apprentices, common stressors for them, including those with disabilities, the number one would be finding a job. The first step in an apprenticeship is to find an employer who's willing to sponsor you. But this is a huge challenge for a lot of apprentices, especially those with disabilities. They can't find an employer who's willing to hire them. They might lack industry connections or work experience, and so they find it difficult to even register as an apprenticeship because they can't find a job. Our research has also found that challenges on the job can include discrimination, harassment, and bullying. There also can be communication challenges, especially with your journey person mentor, who is the person that is training you for 80% of the time on the job. Other stressors include not having time to be able to go to the doctor, not being able to access free counseling. So those are the common stressors that apprentices identified in our research. The results showed, though, that apprentices with disabilities were in particular facing some barriers with their apprenticeship training. Our survey with apprentices found that persons with disabilities were less likely to say that their journey persons communicated with them in an effective manner compared to persons without disabilities. So the communication and the learning was a difficulty. Only 58% of apprentices with disabilities said they sense that they fit in at the workplace. This was much lower than apprentices without disabilities. Apprentices with disabilities were also less likely to say they felt included at the classroom at technical training institutes. So we can see that apprentices with disabilities do face barriers around feeling excluded and isolated. Equity groups in general in apprenticeships are more likely to observe or directly experience a higher degree of bullying and harassment at the workplace compared to those who are from a non-equity group. So we asked apprentices with disabilities what we could do as an organization to better support them, supporting them getting employment, having a more positive experience on the job, and what we could do to make recommendations that would better support them. So the apprentice feedback that we received was we need to help apprentices with disabilities find more relevant resources, like centralize them in one place. Focus more on intersectionality. So a lot of women came to us and said, when you don't recognize or acknowledge that I'm a woman in the trades, but I'm also a person with a disability in the trades, you are not letting me bring my whole self to your work. So you need to focus more on intersectionality and how that impacts me. We were told we need to create more inclusive materials and try and have more inclusive events. And we need to implement projects about apprentices with disabilities and partner with organizations that support persons with disabilities. So based on the apprentice feedback we received, we are on a journey in terms of trying to implement more solutions that will help address the things that apprentices with disabilities said that we needed to work on. So we're on a journey and we want to try to aim to do things every year that will help us become more inclusive as an organization. So as a starting point, we thought it was important that we develop an accessibility framework that would help us identify where we're currently at and what we need to do to try to become more inclusive. So we enlisted Innova, which is connected to the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, and they provided us advice on how we could become more inclusive. So at CAF, we have a board of 20 board of directors that represent each one of the groups in the apprenticeship community. So employers, labor, educators, the provinces and territories, and equity priority groups. And they've got 4 seats each. And underneath the board, there's 3 committees: the research committee, the outreach committee, and the justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion committee. Each of those 3 committees has committed to doing work to try to make CAF more inclusive to persons with disabilities. So the research project is doing projects in collaboration with organizations that support persons with disabilities. We're doing webinars. The outreach committee is working on the Skilled Trades Hub, which has resources for people who are interested in finding out more about apprenticeships. We're developing a Supporting Equity in Trades website where employers can get information about hiring, training, and retaining persons with disabilities. Through a project with the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work, we're supporting having sign language interpretation at our events. And our graphic designer is working on making our documents on our website more accessible. Our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee is also working on an inclusion statement for our organization, where the staff is also getting training through Innova and the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work. And then we're also working on an Indigenous engagement guide. So one of the things Apprentices with Disabilities said we should do was create a centralized hub for all the key resources. So we have done that through the Skilled Trades Network, as all the key resources for employers and apprentices in one place. We are also partnering with organizations that support disabilities and doing projects. And I'd like to share a bit of information about each of these projects with you. So we are working on engaging employers. So the #1 barrier apprentices with disabilities face, based on the research, is the difficulty in finding an employer sponsor. So for individuals who are interested in pursuing careers in the skilled trades, we're trying to reach out to employers and provide them links to resources that are going to help them hire, train, and retain apprentices with disabilities. So we have talked to employers and organizations that support persons with disabilities. We've created a guide, and we are hosting webinars for employers, giving them access to the free resources that would really help them and their organizations successfully hire, train, and retain persons with disabilities. We also want to partner with organizations that support persons with disabilities, so we can learn more and that we can approach industry together in partnership. So we are working with the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work to do some work around reaching out to industry and letting them know about how we can support apprentices with disabilities, to encourage the hiring and training and retaining of persons with disabilities. So we went to the Mechanical Contractors Association in July, and we talked to, you know, over 50 small and medium-sized businesses about the resources that are available at CAF and the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work. We're also supporting training for our own staff so that we can be more inclusive in our approach to supporting apprentices with disabilities who come to our events. We're also, with the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work, going to host a discussion session at our Supporting Equity in Trades conference that will be specifically focused on apprentices with disabilities and better understanding their needs and what supports could be implemented to better help them. We're also engaging in a lot of communication activities to help get the word out to industry about the positive benefits associated with hiring, training, and retaining persons with disabilities. One of the most common barriers for apprentices relates to workplace and learning supports. So CAF has partnered with Irving Shipbuilding and Unifor, and we are supporting apprentices who need support to get the help they need so they can be successful. So we're providing over 1,000 apprentices with access to skill coaches who are going to help monitor their logbooks, which is an important part of an apprenticeship because it proves what you know and what you don't know. And the skill coaches are a go-to source for help for the apprentice. So if the apprentice feels they need to improve their skills in a certain area, they can go to the skills coach for some actual help and support in that area. Apprentices also have access to learning strategists, people who are going to help them with their skill gaps. They can get, you know, assessed and then get some supports like extra tutoring if they need it, or assistive learning devices, or help getting accommodations for the exam. The learning strategists are also helping the apprentices with study habits and getting ready for the multiple choice test that they have to do at the end of their training. Our hope is by offering these supports, we can get more apprentices through their program, progressing through the levels of their apprenticeship and passing the certification examination. We're also partnered with the operating engineers, where we're providing examination supports for 2,000 apprentices, including Red Seal preparation workshops and the ability to review modules in an online resource. So often we find for apprentices who might have a learning challenge or they learn differently, they need a resource online so that they can practice their skills, and they need the content to be trades-based. So if you're struggling with math or problem solving, for example, you need to be able to review the content with trades-based examples. So we've created a resource that has videos of tradespeople doing the job and then explaining math or problem solving context examples in the context of the skilled trades workplace. Apprentices can access this resource at any time if they want to review. And then there's a whole workshop on the resource that talks to them about study habits and getting ready for the Red Seal multiple choice test, how you get exam accommodations if you need them, and how you tackle the multiple choice test. So it gives a lot of tips and strategies. And then we've also created sheets for those who struggle with exam anxiety about how you can manage that when you're getting ready to take the multiple choice certification exam. And we're really motivated around wanting to support people who have learning disabilities or learn differently, because we know when people are able to pass the multiple choice exam and become certified journey persons, they're more likely to access full-time permanent work with benefits. And they earn more throughout their entire careers. So it's very important that we do everything we can to help people finish their training and pass and get their certification if they can. The resource is really helping apprentices. It's improving their commitment to want to take the multiple choice test or retake it. I just wanted to share with you some information about our upcoming events. So on October 3rd, we're partnering with the Ontario Disability Employment Network, and we're having a webinar all focused on employers and providing them with resources and information they need so they can successfully hire, train, and retain, accommodate persons with disabilities. We're also having an event on October 23rd at Algonquin College, which is focused on supporting Indigenous apprentices. And then on October 25th, we're having an event promoting apprenticeship and careers in the skilled trades to youth and newcomers. And then on November 5th, we're having a webinar with the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work, focused once again on reaching out to employers and teaching them disability confidence through the CCRW Disability Confidence Toolkit. And would love to see you at our Supporting Equity in Trades Conference, which is being held in Toronto from May 24th to the 26th. And as I mentioned before, we will be having a special session in partnership with the Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work, which will be a discussion where apprentices with disabilities can talk about some of their challenges and needed supports and what we can do to better support them as they go through their apprenticeship journey. So that's all for me. I'm happy to pass it over to Jason McBride.
Thank you, Emily. That was very informative. Jason, are you ready?
I'm absolutely ready.
Thank you.
Thank you again for having me here, and Emily, for all of the fantastic information. A good portion of what you said is some of the stuff I'm going to follow up with, which is fine. My name is Jason McBride, and I'm the National Partnership Specialist for a apprentice support program, which is funded by the federal government. And we support all 55 Red Seal trades in every postal code in the country. My job is to talk about the program, share information, education, and bring resources to unions, employers, educators, government, in order to create a better education and a better understanding of the needs of apprentices who have disabilities. Now, we often talk about disabilities as being a challenge or a barrier, but in reality, they're simply differences. We support all disabilities, physical, developmental, mental health, neurodiversity, and episodic in supporting our apprentices. The program is very straightforward to come on board with that I work with. You need only to self-identify as having a disability to receive our supports. Ryan, am I going at a good speed? I'm trying to pace myself.
You're good, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And in giving our supports, we have offices in most of the major centers from coast to coast, and we have a team of accessibility consultants who work one-on-one confidentially with every apprentice who we work with. That being said, we are really making changes in the lives of apprentices who have barriers to either entering, advancing, or completing their Red Seal certification through the national trades programs. Today, I was invited to come and talk about the stigma of disability in the trades and in the workplace, and through education, how we can best remove the stigma, reduce the stigma. I don't know if we'll ever remove it, but we can certainly reduce it. There's a great quote from Ryan Jenkins that I like, and it says, "The future of work is human connection." If we look at disability within the workforce from a global perspective, globally 1 billion people live with a disability, and that comes from the Harvard Business Review. Now, even if we think about the numbers that Emily put forward at 7% for people in trades, for apprentices, that is really very much a conservative number. When we bring that a little closer to home to Canada, the working age between 15 and 65, 27% of Canadians self-identify as having a disability. And for teaching purposes, that's 1 in 4. I also self-identify as having a disability, and I'll tell you why I bring that up in just a minute. Also, according to the Canadian Mental Health Association, by age 50, 1 out of every 2 Canadians will have had a challenge from an episodic disability, a health scare, or a mental health challenge. So how do we overcome the stigma of disability? Well, for the most part, it comes from disclosure. And I'm going to share a few stats and a few quotes as we go through here. So I call this the disclosure dilemma. 88% of employees with invisible disabilities choose not to disclose their condition. Well, why? Well, fear of stigma. So fear of being socially isolated. Social isolation leads to physical and psychological distress, poor well-being, decreased job performance. Employees with invisible disabilities may struggle in silence, feeling unsupported and be misunderstood. Now, in my experience in speaking with employers and unions in schools and government, and also from the Harvard Business Review that I mentioned earlier, employers often lack awareness and the needs of people with invisible disabilities and are often ill-prepared to provide the necessary supports and accommodations or productivity needs. But that unto itself might be a fallacy. So it's not that people are unprepared or unwilling. In all of the conversations that I have had, including different employers and union heads, it's always been a conversation of how do we warm up this room? So I bring up myself disclosing at this point, and the reason why I've started disclosing my disability in the last, let's even just say 10 months, is so that people feel comfortable in having the conversation. Disability, not unlike the conversation about death in our society, is something that's uncomfortable. People don't understand it. They don't necessarily want to talk about it. They don't know how to approach it, but they always are well-meaning. So nobody wants to offend. Nobody wants to put somebody in an awkward position. And in many cases, that's the reason why we're not having conversations. So in reality, most people want to help. Most people want to learn. Most people want to have the conversation. And I give a couple of examples. I had a really great conversation about our program in supporting apprentices with an executive director of a national organization. And I happen to be talking about e-reader pens. And the coolest thing about the e-reader pen is it's wonderful for folks who have dyslexia or low reading skills. And what it does is it reads out loud. You hold it in your hand and you scan over the words, and it reads out loud the words. And if you come to a definition that you don't understand, you press the button and it gives you the definition. It tells you what it means, which is fantastic. So I was having this great conversation with this executive director, and her jaw dropped and her eyes went wide and said, I have suffered with dyslexia my entire life. I had no idea that this existed. I helped her find an e-reader pen and it's changed her life. But it's a matter of having conversation. Another example is I happen to have been having a conversation about being somebody with ADHD and a neurodiverse person with somebody who's also in a very high position in an organization that I have a wonderful amount of respect for, and they work primarily in construction. And I didn't know this had happened until about 8 months later. But she came to me about 2 months ago at a meeting and said, I wanted to tell you that because you came forward and had an open conversation about having ADHD, about medication, and just opening the room to being, I guess, warming the room maybe. She thought, well, if he can talk about it in front of 100 people, why can't I go talk about it with my doctor? So she went and she got diagnosed. And this is a woman in her 50s. So somebody who's lived with this for a very, very long time. And she got diagnosed and she got medication and she's gotten support. And she came to me to tell me that even just that conversation of having an open dialogue changed her life. Now, I give these stories because I find that if I'm in a room having a conversation with groups and I bring that up, oftentimes somebody's hand comes up and says, my son or daughter has fill in the blank of maybe it's neurodivergence, maybe it's a physical challenge, it's something, or their cousin or their friend, or they have somebody who they work with. And then the conversation gets longer and warmer and more inclusive. So I think that the pathway to education and inclusion is through having these conversations more and more and more. So how do we accommodate disabilities once we finally come through the disclosure process? And I think as far as educating to remove stigma, what we need to do is not generalize disabilities. A good friend of mine, Pete Bennett, who is the founder of Distinctability, very sharp guy, he had a course that I took a few months ago, and in this course is a wonderful quote that says, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Now, what strikes me with that is if you meet one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability. The problem is that we measure disability. So we say, Billy's on the spectrum. Well, if we think of the spectrum is not linear. So it doesn't get stronger or worse or more episodic as you go down the line or down the ruler. The spectrum is really a color spectrum. And for teaching purposes, if you consider a color spectrum, some people are green. Some people are a mix of green and yellow. Some people are a mix of yellow and orange. Some people are more purple. And all of these different sections within that spectrum are the differences in how these people get through their lives. It's how they manage situations. It's how they work best. Now, when we think of it that way, it makes it a completely different conversation when we are talking about accommodations, and we're also talking about productivity needs. And these are not the same thing. So if we talk about accommodations are, by example, and most people, and this is a running joke if you've heard it, well, sorry, but most people think accommodations come with a terrible continental breakfast. However, accommodation is more often a flexible schedule or opportunity to work from home or understanding that somebody has doctor's appointments that they must go to and they happen to be during a workday. That's accommodation. But if we're talking about things like e-reader pens, or we're talking about things like ergonomic tools that might be lighter to use or that are on wheels, or an example of an apprentice who we've supported is the gentleman is a mechanic apprentice and he has 6 fingers on one hand. He's never had a glove that fit him properly in his life. So Brad Simons, who is one of our accessibility consultants, is a wonderful, wonderful coach, went and found a company to custom make gloves for this gentleman so that he can comfortably work. And that's an excellent productivity support for him. So when we're talking about these different things, we need to be thinking about, so how educated am I as an employer or as an HR professional, or even as somebody who's mentoring an apprentice? Education removes the stigma. There's lots of benefits of education and inclusion at all levels. So according to Jim Clifton of Gallup Polling Research in Canada, 70% of the variance between lousy, I love this quote, 70% of the variance between lousy, good, and great cultures can be found in the knowledge, skills, and talent of the team leader. Not the players, but the team leader. That's kind of a profound statement, and it almost puts a spotlight on managers. However, there's a contrast to this. Research finds that managers who were empathetic, patient, willing to listen to their team members' experiences. So lived experience is very key here. To accommodate their requests were more successful leaders. Now, what comes of this? Well, their teams reported a 63% increase in well-being and a 71% increase in employee engagement. Now, if you can increase your employee engagement just by finding out what somebody's lived experience is with the challenge or with whatever difference that they're working with, in order to, again, enter, advance, or complete in their Red Seal trade, or in any job, 71% increase. You can't buy that on your own. That comes with empathy and inclusion and education. And because I'm a stats person, when managers used phrases such as, how do I set you up for success? Or what can I do as a manager to support you to perform your best? We're seen as 92% more approachable by their team members. And one of my favorite quotes is by a good friend of mine, Grant Cardone. And the quote is, be the lighthouse, not the tugboat. 92% found the manager more approachable by being the lighthouse. And it's not that the manager went and said, I know everything about what you're going through, or I know exactly the accommodation or productivity need that you need. It's a matter of listening to the person's lived experience. So in closing, I want to share 2 examples of successful programs that large organizations, LEDCOR, for example, who I know are CAF members. I'm doing a talk on the 8th of October with LEDCOR with their employee resource group, so ERGs. And I hadn't heard of ERGs until I spoke with LEDCOR, and then I had an opportunity to speak with their volunteer employees who manage this program. And then I dove a little deeper. It's a volunteer style employee representative program to bring more education and resources into the workplace. They have a meeting, which is usually either quarterly or every 6 months. And everybody attends, everybody. So ERGs are credited with improving work conditions for alienated workers through sharing information, making work environment better for everybody, identifying leaders in the making, lowering the chance of suppressed frustrations. ERGs can help surface an issue that might be too risky for an individual to bring up alone. And this can help address problems quickly and alleviate toxic work environments. I love the idea that employees are coming together and gathering information and sharing it with their team, sharing with their management, and including everybody in the conversation. And again, it comes down to even the disclosure, like I mentioned before. It comes down to bringing up the subject and opening for discussion. Another really cool thing that I've discovered is a disability passport. Now you might think, what's a disability passport? Is it something I travel with? Well, not necessarily, but kind of. So organizations like Fujitsu, which is a global organization in every country pretty much, and they do this in the UK actually specifically. If an employee or an apprentice has a specific set of supports that they require, it's all listed in the disability passport. So they don't have to go through the mental challenge and anguish and educational process of sharing their lived experience with the regional or new HR professional or manager. They can go and they can use this disability passport and share it. And all the information is in there of past supports, what is successful, what's working, and how long the person has been working with the organization, and all of the pertinent details. Another organization that's using this is the Government of Canada. So if you work for the Government of Canada, this is available to you. So in closing, I want to say that I think the best way to remove stigma in our society and the workplace is simply by opening up the conversation. We can't be afraid to be having conversations about disability, lived experience, how I work best, because that's how we can best inform each other, and that's how we can best support each other in the workplace and also in apprenticeship. Our program of supporting apprentices in Red Seal trades is very easy to find. All you need to do is go to ccrw.org and contact us there, or you could reach out to us through the Canadian Apprenticeship Forum for supports. And again, we don't require a disclosure of disability, or sorry, we don't require a medical disclosure of disability. We only require self-disclosure. So we're here to support. It's a federal program and it's available in every postal code in Canada. And again, in closing, thank you so much, Chloe and Emily, for having me here today to share this information, not just about CCRW, but about supports that could help in the workplace and maybe to reduce stigma in your lives.
Thank you, Jason. Apologies for that. It was very informative. Thank you. I would like to ask Emily and Jason if they would answer any questions. Would that be okay?
Absolutely.
If folks have any questions for Emily and or Jason, please don't hesitate to voice them or write them in the chat. We will wait a few moments. Thank you.
Yeah, someone's asked, would the accessibility framework be available publicly or is it just for CAF? I can ask about that. I think it's pretty specific to the things that CAF needs to work on. But I'll see if it would be able to be shared with potentially other people. Our first steps are that we took the accessibility framework to the Justice, Inclusion, Diversity Committee, and we're going to get the staff training as a first step. And then we're also hoping to develop some accessibility policies and accommodation policy, and ANOVA's helping us get some templates. So I think staff training and getting those right policies in place are going to be the first two steps that we take. And then we're definitely going to try to make our events more inclusive by inviting people to let us know if they need an accommodation, because right now we don't have any questions. So those are the steps that we're going to take, and then we're going to do a little each year. But I think the most important thing we've done is just connect with organizations like NEADS and Canadian Council for Rehabilitation and Work, because I have just learned so much by actually listening and partnering with organizations that support disabilities. And so I think at the staff level and organizational level, that's really the most impactful thing that we've done so far. But we want to keep going in our journey. How do you know that the pass rates for your clients or those accessing your resources have improved? You follow this group specifically, or is it included in the national stats? We for the operating engineers project, we're asking them specifically, like, did you access the resource? And we are asking them, did you pass the certification exam? So that group who's in our project, yes, we were asking them specifically. The national stats would be like 70% of apprentices pass their multiple choice test and 30% don't. So anything we can do to try to get more people to pass the test, we really want to do it, because as I said, it's so key to the rest of your career. Like, you get more money, you're more likely to be full-time employed. There's a lot of positive benefits that come with certification.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat, so I think we can proceed the concluding remarks. I will just share my screen one moment. Thank you to Emily and Susan for sharing their brilliance with us. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any comments, concerns, and or questions. My team is always happy to receive feedback, and it helps us plan our programming. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. We will send an email once the recording for this event is live on our YouTube channel. We can stop the recording.